the Can't Stop the Growth podcast invested as our exclusive sponsor for the 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards. Wow, we are grateful. If you want to experience a B2B podcast that is both impacting internal employee growth and advancing leader listeners across the globe, this show is it. We know we can't stop the growth of this show. It will soon be the #1 podcast in the home services category. Thank you to the host and 2022 PFN Award winner, Chad Peterman. The wait is over. The 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards are here, and you get the best of the best podcast hosts, Rachel Downey, founder of Share Your Genius, leading this conversation. The podcast GOAT and 2023 award winner coming right up.
And the winner is Ryan Berman. I am Rachel Eltz Downey, joining for a special series presented by the PeopleForward Network, where we celebrate the 2023 winners of the PeopleForward Networked Impact Awards. Ryan is the founder of Courageous, the author of Return on Courage, and the host of the Courageous podcast. And the person who nominated Ryan is Greg Wasserman, who described Ryan as courageous. Here's what Greg had to say. Ryan forces people to overcome fears, to look at doing things differently, and guides them to reach a destination they are holding themselves back from achieving. I look forward to his Thursday newsletter, which tells a touching story to get me to think about how I can be courageous, do more, and think differently. The same approach is what he shares with his team internally, the world, and his corporate clients. He believes in honest, open communication. Courage sets you free, individually and within your company's walls with consumers. There are 3 essential factors that make up courage: knowledge, faith, and action. And it is through this lens that Ryan leads people. As we get into the conversation, I am first curious to know your reaction to what Greg shared about you.
I am, you don't do it for this. You know what I mean? I'm on my own journey, but like big smile ear to ear on hearing that we're making an impact with him and with Greg and hopefully others. And also that he got the definition that we're trying to put out in the world on courage, right, is also nice to hear because, again, it was a 3-year listening lap for me to get to that definition and to make the choice. You know, I was running a company and I was around 40 years old. I had partners. I remember sitting in this office that was like, oh, I finally made the fancy office. And is this how I'm supposed to feel? And I didn't feel satisfied. And so I'm writing my book and I remember a very particular moment where it's like, how can I write a book about courage and stay? You kind of have to be courageous yourself. If you go on this journey and everything you learn is telling you that we weren't, in my opinion, being as people first as we could have. So that was the irony for me. So to hear him share what he shared, Greg, love you, man. Thank you so much. Definitely a surprise. Very grateful.
So I want to unpack this word courage. Like, how did you come to the definition that you have now defined?
Yeah. So Rachel, I come from 20 years of running story and narrative businesses, advertising agencies. And we had landed on this concept of courageous ideas are the only ones that matter. And fully believe that, still believe that. And when you're not there to defend your idea in the market, you know, you're not going to be there when it comes across a feed and it's like, oh, look at this one right here. And so you're going to blend in if you're not putting your brave idea out into the world. Again, there's a difference between a reckless idea and a courageous idea. Let me just share that as well. But we had landed on this idea and I had wondered if leaders, you know, the first 6 months of writing my book, Return on Courage, is this even an idea that's a monetizable idea? Like, do people want courage in their work? There's risk management departments. Are there courage management departments? Right. And so I ended up going around interviewing all these leaders, and it became clear that outside of the quarterly earning calls, if they put their business on pause, they knew if they were going to stay relevant that they needed to be brave and they needed to be courageous. But going through the weeds of emails every day and you could see how courage would take a back seat to just getting through email or getting through the day or getting to that next annual review. So I remember going back to my partners at the time being like, I'm worried that this might be a complete waste of time. Like, do companies really think that they need this or not? And obviously, I've now, since 2019 that we launched Courageous, and everything we do is about helping a company that might be stuck, might be scared, might be stale, or might be safe. Like anywhere where they're one of those four, we now get the call to come in for one, have a hard conversation, but we're not jerks about it. It's like what conversation has to happen inside the organization. That is a courageous conversation. And then two, if I had sleeves, we'd roll them up with our partners and we'd help them figure out what truly makes them special. And usually it's a combination of, we always say we're a special force that helps you figure out you're special. So what is that story? And then how do you consistently unlock that story on the inside with the people that care before you ever take it to the outside world?
I want to rewind the tape further if we can. Obviously, you had this pivotal moment in your career. You're writing this book. You were like, I need to be courageous myself. But there had to have been breadcrumbs along the way that led you to that moment. Can you reflect
Yeah.
back on, I don't even know if your childhood or earlier years in your career where courage played a pivotal role in your own success?
When I look back at the decisions that I had made in my life, moving to New York City at 22, I remember even my family had put me on an airplane. I wanted to go. It's a summer camp at the age of 8, 2 states away. Yeah, I think when you write a book, it becomes a rite of passage. And as I think about the choices that I made, and back then I was chalking up to adventure, right? 29, I moved to California and I moved out here to write movies, not live one. I never meant to become an entrepreneur. And our first business were four of us out of a house and we grew it to 90 people. And I never doubted. I was scared and there was a ton of fear and I can be stubborn, but I never doubted or lost belief in who I was as a leader. And so when you go on this book writing journey and you're sitting with all these amazing people that have also felt belief and felt there was something they had to put into the universe. And then I step back and look at the choices that I've made. Fast fact time. Do you know that 50% of the US population lives 50 miles from where they were born? You have
Mhm.
170 million people, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'm not saying those people are not courageous, by the way. I'm just saying it's interesting that half the population goes on an adventure, and I just happen to fall into that 170 million. So when I think about myself and the choices that I've made, I did sort of acknowledge, wow, I've always had enough belief that if I leap, good things will happen. And if you think about the definition that Greg had shared, knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage. You're never going to have every bit of knowledge you need to make a call, which is why we need faith. And when we talk about faith, we don't mean it in the religious sense, but in the feel sense, in the intuition sense. And how often in your life have you known exactly the right move and you felt it was the right move and then you do nothing about it? And so the irony is knowledge and faith without action is paralysis. Faith and action without knowledge is a reckless move. And knowledge and action without faith, if you're numb on the inside, you're working on status quo. You're working on safe. So it needs to be all three levers: knowledge, faith, and action. Another way to say this is think, feel, and do to know you're working on something brave. And we use that framework, and there's a whole slew of others like, well, which knowledge should I follow? And how do we actually go about building faith? And where should we take action? Where shouldn't we take action? And so a lot of our work is through the lens of those three. And to answer your question, wow, if I really think about my journey, I do feel that I've made brave choices. I've taken action on those choices. And anytime I've ever been frustrated or stuck, scared, stale, or safe, it's because I knew the right move and felt it and I never leaped.
Where did you get the courage originally to take those first leaps? Did like that come from your parents? Did that come from somebody who believed in you?
I mean, I think I was very lucky. I kind of came into this world with a cheat code. Like my parents are still together to this day. It's like level 5 out of the gate. If I was a plant, there was attention and sunshine and water. And I was able to be a free range child who could be curious. And I had an older brother also. So I got to, like, as an observationalist, watch what he did. I'm like, oh, he got in trouble. Don't do that. Right. So, like, did I pick this job or or the other way around? Right. The world picked the job for me. I think having that level of safety out of the gate probably gave me at least the starter tools to be curious and go on the adventure. And again, moving to New York City at 22 years old with on an internship salary, by the way. I was one of 22 interns. I called it Internship Island. Like, am I going to be the one that gets the job at the end of it? Which I was like, I will stay at this office to get a job. What do I have to do to get this job? And so I think being focused on that and just, even though I wasn't as intentional thinking that was courage in the moment, how could I be? I had the determination and the work ethic to believe that anything was possible. And again, it wasn't until later that I stepped back and looked at it all. I was like, wow, okay, that was courageous of me.
How big of a role do you think confidence plays in courage?
Massive, massive. I think you have to have confidence to have belief, right? Now, overconfidence is something you got to be a little concerned about as well, right? Because if faith in action with no knowledge is a reckless move, I'm sure there are times where they probably could have collected some data, right? Some knowledge before they leap. But having that confidence and that belief that it's possible, if you're going to do something new for the first time, right? Even innovating in the world or even for yourself, that there is confidence there. I describe courage a lot like skiing. So skiing to me, there's certain levels. There's bunny slope skiers, there's intermediate slopes, there's like jump out of a helicopter, black diamond slopes. And
Mm-hmm.
courage to me is a very relative idea. It's a muscle that you can build. And sometimes we're working with bunny slope teams, and other times it's the black diamond squad, right? And it's the super elite. They're ready for it. If you're not down for the mountain, I am probably the wrong guy for you. If you're willing to go to the mountain, and ironically, courage is not my favorite word. Willing and willingness is. If there's a willingness to go to the mountain and try to be, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to that next level. Okay, right. I think I'm going to do that one slope at the end of the day. That's a black diamond. Then I'm probably the guy for you, or we're that company for you. If you're not interested in, like, that's like, no, pass, or even like a praise ski, right? The after skiers, maybe we can work with that group. At least they're close to the mountain. But I think it's just like that. It's just a muscle that's building. And sometimes you get bunny slope teams, and other times it's the black diamond team.
So I want to talk about this a little bit more and understand, like you mentioned faith, and faith not in the spiritual sense, but maybe in like the intuition or intrinsic kind of space. For people who don't have that, like how do you encourage people to get more of that or be more aware of their intuition?
I mean, look, if they're listening to this conversation, then they're open to getting there, right? Like, you're not listening to a people first podcast if you weren't people first. If you didn't want to do more yourself, or you don't want to unlock your team. And to me, I think it's just that we're not robots. I know AI has not taken over yet. We're all trying to do the best we can. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that there are times in all of our lives where Maslow is winning. And that means that fear is winning, right? There's a fear. You're afraid to have that conversation with someone on your team, or you're afraid to ask for that promotion, or you don't want to upset somebody. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings that's on your team. So you avoid a conversation that you probably should have in a constructive way. Usually we're trying to suppress what we feel versus address what we feel. And my challenge to you is, like, the sooner you trust that feeling, you trust that gut and intuition act, the more time you're going to save and the happier you're going to be, by the way. I think that's the irony is, usually when we have faith and we trust the feeling side of ourselves, and we go through it, even if it's hard. Now, it doesn't mean you need to be a jerk about the way you have conversations with others. I always say tough love is very different than tough. Tough, you're a jerk. Tough love is coming from a good place. And once you get through that conversation and you do it in a tactful way, usually both people come out the other side stronger. And this is just one example. Okay, but let's say that you're listening to this show and something and you act on it, but you're numb on the inside. Well, I'm here to tell you that maybe you've suppressed it for so long that you're not being challenged anymore. Or you've been at a company for 9 years. You're going through the motions. And I think it's time to ask yourself, if you step back from that person, is that the person you really want to be in the universe? Are you really satisfied? And if the answer is you're yearning for more, then maybe it's time to not lie to ourselves and be like, what would it take to really light me up? If I could feel again at work, if I had faith in this business, if I had faith in that job or in the people that I'm working with. And again, I'm not here to create a Jerry Maguire moment where everybody's grabbing their goldfish and resigning, but we're only on this merry-go-round once. I think the idea is to keep it real with your coworkers, but more than that, keep it real with yourself. So if you feel your job, you're on your way. But if you feel alone, I think a lot of leaders feel alone. Maybe it's time you start with yourself and address why you're feeling that way.
Why do you think it's so challenging for people to get you said it really well, where it was like they know they're unhappy, but they're afraid to address it in one shape or
Right.
form. Like, why is that so challenging?
Right. Why do we suppress it versus address it? Yeah. I
Yes.
think,
Yes.
right. Well, the thing that's, and again, let me be the first to remind you, Rachel, that I am not a doctor. You know, I mean, I went to college for 4 years, not for seven. But what I will say is, as I started to interview all these people that study courageous behavior, and my 3 year listening lab had me sitting with, now I call them the brave, the bullish, and the brainiac. And on the brave side, it was like Navy SEALs, astronauts, firefighters, tornado chasers, people that put themselves in the line of harm or in line of fire. I'm like, why do you do that? How do you do that? On the bullish side, there were leaders at Alexa, Apple, Google, Harvard, Method, Domino's, like these companies that were massive businesses, but were still brave enough to continue to pivot. They understood that what was at stake was relevance. And I think that's really interesting. You would think the little company was the one that had the ability to be more agile, but it was the big behemoths, the ones that were committed to chasing relevance, that were pivoting. And then the biggest surprise to me was the brainiac. So clinical psychologists, Cambridge PhDs, people that study the way that we're wired. And if you really think about what the system is that we all have that's calling all the shots, it's this central nervous system. When was the last time you said central nervous system in a normal conversation? We're like, oh, hi, honey, how was dinner? How's your central nervous system doing? Oh, yeah, did you see the games this weekend? Oh, yeah. LeBron's central nervous system's unbelievable. It's not exactly like it's just rolling off the tongue, but this is the system that we all have at the center of us. And it's a system, it's an operating system. And right there in the middle is nervousness, right? Don't touch that hot stove. Don't have that conversation. Don't move to that new city. So your standard operating system is designed to keep you safe. And when we were cavemen or cave women and bears were chasing us for berries and dopamine or cortisol hit the right parts of the body, I was able to run away from a bear and stay alive. And as much as we think we've evolved, that is the same system we all have on the inside. We're sitting in traffic, but our bodies are like the bear is chasing us for berries. We finally muster the courage to say something at a board meeting, and your boss bites your head off. Think of your brain like a reverse onion and all the things that ever happened in your life that might have gone south. A moment in high school, getting cut from a sports team, a breakup, you having a bad experience trying to go to a different city. We're just suppressing them, and they're just building on top of each other, and we're not doing anything about it. There's no strategies. We just continue to bury it and bury it because our nervous system's like, hey, remember that feeling? Don't do that again. Do not. suggest that. And so the aha moment for me, after talking to all these amazing people, were, well, what if you could develop a central courage system to combat the way our central nervous systems operate? Could I actually develop what that system is? And that was the aha moment for me after the 3 years, was when I went deeper on which knowledge should I follow and how do I build faith and where do I take action. That framework, which we cover in Return on Courage, is the building of your central courage system. And imagine now if not only I'm doing it, but my coworkers doing it. And that becomes the ultimate multiplier. Or at home, like if your spouse is doing it and you're doing it. So I think that's where it comes from, is our CNSs, our central nervous systems, are designed to keep us safe. And we've never designed a system to combat that. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to give you the tools and the framework, frankly, that gives you the confidence to be courageous, and at work to lead courageously.
I love how you frame that from central nervous system to courageous. I think that's really creative. And that really resonates with me in terms of just like thinking about that idea. I'm curious, like, as you think about a people forward leader, how critical is it, do you think, for them to have a grasp of that and being courageous in order to be a people forward leader?
Well, I think if you pull a Ryan Berman string, I know this is the first time we've had a chance to connect, but I always say if you don't know what you stand for, you never know when to take a stand. And a lot of this stems from starting with yourself and understanding what really matters to you. Every company on the planet probably has a mission, a vision, and a purpose statement. Really good companies have values that they operationalize, right? I would challenge that a lot of companies, that if you're listening and you're a leader, how valuable are your values really? Like, are you really utilizing them and operationalizing them? But then as people, what I've discovered is that most of us don't treat ourselves like a brand. Like, I, as a human, have values. My personal values, what I stand for, is very different sometimes than what the business stands for. And it's awesome when those come into alignment, by the way. But for the last 5 years, I've gone around the country and asked people, like, can you rattle off your values? And, you can imagine what I get back when I hear that, like crickets, right? And to me, my number one personal core value is optimism. My second one is creativity. Third value is courage. And fourth is excellence. And almost every move I now make is through the lens of one of those four values. I can't explain why I'm wired this way as a glass half full person. I hope you can hear that in the way we interact, but like, I want you to be successful. I want to do everything in my power to unlock people. Creativity is my superpower, probably not surprising coming out of the Mad Men world, right? That I had surrounded myself with storytellers. And so creative business is very important to me, how to use creativity to help the bottom line. Courage is less about, oh, I'm so courageous, and more about, with my short time on this planet, I want to surround myself with people that want to push, that want to leap. And I'm happy to help them, give them the tools to do that. And then fourth, excellence. And this is sort of like a blessing and a curse, right? Like, I live a mile from the beach. Nothing would make me happier than wishing I was more lazy and that I could just go sit on a beach and do nothing. And then I acknowledge that's not who I am. I want to be great on my short time on the planet, and I want to surround myself with those types of people. So every activity that I now do, I'm always intentionally thinking about, hey, does this align with my values or not? And I think being a people first leader, it starts with you and understanding, hey, I said these things are valuable, or hey, the business says these things are valuable. Are we living those values, or are they just CYA values collecting dust on a wall or some employee book? Here's how you know, by the way. Let me give you one little tool that I like to do. When you see something on Instagram or TikTok and it pisses you off, and you're like, that person is just gloating, I want to unfollow that person. And it happens, right? Like, there's a visceral moment where, like, should I hit the unfollow button on this person? When that moment happens to you, that is a violation of a personal value that you probably have not declared. And my ask or challenge is to start declaring those values, like make sense of what matters to you and start designing a life where you're surrounding yourself with people that share those passions for the same things you are.
I think that sort of social media tactic is really interesting, and it makes me wonder. It's like, instead of commenting something negative, just unfollow because it's like, this doesn't align to your values. I think that could be a potential movement we take in fixing the internet a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, think about what your body must feel, how angry you must be to just want to vilify
Mm.
someone. And wow, how did they get to that point of view? It's more about acknowledging, like, what do you need for you, for your energy to stay positive? And we can spin out of this pretty quickly. So I'll be careful on this. I will say that I think there's three different types of people that we interact with in the world. There's people that you gain energy from. Obviously, I'm hoping I fall into that category where you feel, yeah, this is like Ryan Berman's a cup of coffee for me. There's people that drain your energy. And usually there's some gravity with the way that person is talking, or there's a violation of one of your values, right? That's bringing you down. And then I think there's a third, which is a maintain of energy. It's not a plus or a minus. It's pretty neutral. And if I'm honest with myself, I don't think that's a great place to be either, frankly. I'd rather be a energy
Mm.
gain than a energy drain or a maintain energy.
You said something of the value side of, like, there might be leaders who have personal values and company values. How important is it, in your opinion, for somebody to align their personal values to the company values that they're participate in?
On a scale of 1 to 10, an 11. At
Okay.
least at some level. It doesn't have to be every value needs to line up, right? And again, this is the challenge to leaders too, because if you have just table stakes values like, oh, our values are trust and integrity, that's like me saying that breathing is a hobby of mine. Like, oh, I'm such a good breather. I do it every day. It's like, why would you have a table stake value? If you're going to hire someone, hopefully they have trust and hopefully there's integrity. And if you're hiring people without integrity, why don't we go solve that problem first?
Mm.
So, off of that, like, how special are the values of the organization? I just can't believe that people don't think that they're not special in their own way. So, why would you want to work at a company if the values were bland? Do you see yourself as bland? So, the first challenge is like, hey, is there a value on the board that I really like lights me up? And I'm like, I'm really passionate about. The company says they're doing this, they're actually doing this. I want to be involved in that. Patagonia, no one guesses with what that company is all about. I don't have to work there to know that they're passionate about environmentalism. And although I don't know for certain because I've never interviewed to get a job there, my guess is if you don't care about saving this planet, you're probably not going to get hired there. Like, you need to be passionate about that. Now, think about most companies. It's kind of like dating. Like, they've got their online dating profile. You're sifting through it. You're like, I think this could be the one. I don't know. This kind of seems cool. They like soccer. I like soccer. Let's go on a date. And by the time you're in and the honeymoon phase ends, it's like, wait a minute, all the things I thought this company stood for, I'm not seeing. And so I think it starts with helping the company get clear on what differentiates them, that makes them special. And then you as a leader having the courage to truly look and go, okay, if you could design a life where you truly were working at a place that believed in the same things that you did, why wouldn't you go on your quest over the next 5 years to find that right place where then you can make a bigger impact? To me, otherwise you're sleeping for 8 hours a day. You go to work and you're not that inspired by it. So you're basically sleeping another 8 hours just to get a third of your life where you finally are free. Doesn't make sense to me.
If a leader was listening to this, and let's say their values were aligned, personal and company, but they were in a spot that I think you called it the safe, stale, stuck, or spinning. They're in those, but the company values align to their personal. Would your advice be for them to potentially move on, or would your advice be to do something different that's equally as courageous?
If you found a home that aligns with your values, you're so far ahead of most. So maybe there's a courageous conversation that needs to happen on the inside of the organization. Often the call that we'll get, whether it's for running an offsite or we're like helping the company figure out what the narrative is on the inside of the business, it starts with you acknowledging that there's a problem and there's a hard conversation that probably has to happen. I have this one slide that says you, two, few, crew, slew. And to me, it's starts with one person having the courage to go, hey, we said this was important, but we're not living that. And two people, it's a closed door conversation with someone like, hey, is this messed up? We said this was important and we're not doing it. And then it moves over to few. And over time, it's like 5 to 10 of us trying to move the ship. And what's cool about companies is there's little tribes inside the company, and then maybe it's a team. Then it moves into a crew and it gets bigger. And finally, the culture is snowballing and it's bigger than you. It becomes a slew. Something that was as controllable as you saying, hey, I think we need to address this moment that started as a closed door conversation with two people and then grew to a few people, and then became a crew, lands at this slew. And a slew, by definition, is an uncontrollable movement. So something as big as a controllable moment of you going, hey, this is messed up, eventually is so much bigger than you and it takes over the culture. Long-winded answer, but it does say like there's a value alignment. Maybe there's a hard conversation that has to happen that allows you to pass go and move on and stay there.
That's a nice image of what that can look like when you start by taking that one step, which was that courageous conversation. I want to go back one more step for people listening who love everything that you're saying and want to be more courageous in their lives and their leadership, personally or at work. Do you have any tips for how somebody can listen better to their intuition? Like any tactical things or practices that you could recommend?
So I'll give you two that I like. One's going to sound like a shameless promotion, so I get it. The first one that's less promo-y is, are you an alarms person? How do you wake up in the morning? Or are you just like, boom, 6 a.m., I'm up?
Oh, I wish. No, actually I'm a neutral. I rely on my husband's alarm.
Okay. So what you've just admitted lovingly is that you're the passenger of the car in the car versus your own car.
But
And I
that's
say
because he
that.
gets up at like 4:45. So I feel like it's a
Okay.
motivator for me.
All right. Fair enough. Well, that's a good start. But my challenge to you is inside your phone. I'm an Apple guy. I'll admit it. I go into my alarms and I've changed the labels to the alarms. So when my alarm goes off, depending on what time, I have multiple messages that I need to see to start my day. So one of them says transfer the light. So imagine waking up every morning and seeing transfer the light. And I think when you're a leader, it can be lonely. It feels dark. I don't want to be on the dark side. I want to be on the light side and give leaders the tools where they can actually go lead. And I know me well enough to know there are certain mornings where I need to see that, and it kickstarts my day off on the right way. Another one are my values. I'll see optimism, creativity, courage, and excellence. I have another one that says send 3 grateful texts, and it
Mm.
gives me the space to have more gratitude. So yours might be, what am I going to do? This is too long, but you get the idea. What am I going to do to be a better listener today? Listen strong. It could be that. It could just be listen, and you know what it means to you. I'll tell you, about 4 or 5 years ago, and these alarm alerts, these labels change. I had to build strong central courage systems because one of the fears I had was I'm not a doctor. And yet this sounds like something like a doctor should have come up with, not me. Who am I? As a television radio major who didn't go to an Ivy League school. So I needed to see that every day to turn it into a habit for me. I'm now at the point where it is. That muscle has been built, and I believe it, and I know I'm trying to be a force for good and to help. So I'm on to the next label, and I'm on to the next alert. So that's one. What do you need to see every morning to start your day off the right way? And use that phone, use technology for good. You could also do that with your calendar, where you just block off time on your calendar, gratitude texts, or whatever it is that you need to see. The other one is not an exact, precise answer to your question. But if I were you, this is the question I would probably ask myself, is there's probably a conversation somewhere in your life, could be with a family member, it might be with someone at work, it might be with like an old friend that you lost touch with, and there's just a gap, and you want it to be better. And so what I've found, this is the shameless promotional one, but like sending a copy of my book and be like, can you read this and let's talk? And I know I wish there was a better way to do this, but gifting knowledge is never a bad thing. And it's like, all right, where do we need to pick up and what did we leave behind? There's a brave conversation that needs to happen, and everybody means well, but sometimes we can't come up with the words on our own, and we need like a little advice to get in there to help us kickstart that conversation. So if Return on Courage can be that for anybody, by all means, grab it at Amazon, grab it at returnoncourage.com and start with yourself. Hopefully check the book out. And if you like the book, then gift it to somebody else that needs it. And hopefully that brings you closer together.
It's awesome. Thanks, Ryan, for that. I want to close us out on one last question. We've kind of covered it, and I will be shocked if I don't know your answer, but I am curious. How would you describe a people first leader?
A people first leader is one, first, the person knows who they are. But second, it's not about them. It's about the people. It's about giving the people what they need to be successful, to thrive. It's not all fluff. It's not all rah rah. Sometimes there's hard conversations that the leader has to have with their people, but it's done so in a way where it can unlock people that might be stuck, that might be scared, that might be playing it safe. And the whole point is to get through all that. Don't suppress it, but address it together and stay courageous.
Thank you, Ryan. Anything else you'd love to share with our audience?
Other than Greg, you're the man. Thank you so much. Was definitely a surprise. And find me on LinkedIn. Anyone who wants to be a little bit more brave and wants to have that conversation. I always, whenever I do a purpose statement, I always come back to I want to be the best friend I can be. And that's truly how I feel is I want to be an ally. And somehow friend in the professional world, it's like friend. No, we're peers. Okay, I want to be friend. So that's the language I'm going to use. So if I can help you figure out who you are, what your values are, find me on LinkedIn and we'll go from there.
Thank you for listening to this episode featuring the PeopleForward Network Impact Awards. Feel free to subscribe or hit that follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can learn more from these PeopleForward leaders.